sparse desert here. Only people I didn't throw on this map that I should have was to say that over here are more where the Midianites are, and they're going to play a big for us in the future, but I didn't put them down here. So as they're traveling out here and they're moving forward in this area, we read about how there was a king here, and this king comes from up north, and he decides, way up by Heshbon, and he decides, let's jump down to read about him for a moment. Verse 21, Israel had sent messengers to Sihon, king of the Amorites, saying, let us pass through your land. We'll not turn aside to vineyards or fields or drink water. We'll go by the king's highway till we pass through your land. But Sihon would not allow Israel to pass through his territory. Instead, he gathers his people together, and they go against Israel, and they come and meet them at this wilderness of Jahaza over here. So they show up to stop the Israelites from their territory up north, which they're just outside of Ammon. They show up from up here. They battle. Not too surprising, Israel defeats them, and they take possessions from them. Now, what's interesting about this is, what do they not do this time? They do not destroy the cities this time. Now it's a little interesting. In the book of Numbers, there's going to be, in fact, you see here, Reuben and Gad. It's kind of interesting. Later on, we're going to see some of these tribes saying, you know, we like this part of the land, and they're going to start occupying things pretty quickly. Now, let me pause for a second and say, I'm not sure this means that even before they entered the land, they were already starting to live in cities, because Moses writes in a strange way. He doesn't write chronologically, so we could be talking about things a little bit out of the order. But in this moment, it does sound like they're starting to take and capture cities like they're going to do in the book of Joshua. But really, the Bible wants us to think of this as just a side note. It wants us to think of this as just one of those times where God delivers these people. Now, first of all, they meet these people, and they they defeat them. And then in verse 25, it goes on to say the Israelites take all these cities, and they take Heshbon, and I'm going to jump to verse 33. And they turned and they went up by the way to Bashan. So Og, the king of Bashan, we're going to move our map here a little bit so you kind of get a sense of where we're at now, because Bashan, way up north, this king now hears about them, and he decides, well, what Sihon couldn't do, I'll do. Now, I'll pause for a second. I tell you what, I'm going to ask the question right now. Why might Og think a little bit more of himself than Sihon? George?
He's a giant.
He's a giant. Yeah. He's that big. He's a big guy. How big is he, George? How big was his bed? Do you remember? 9 by 4. Yeah. He's a monster. Bible identifies him as one of the Rephirim, the mighty men. He's a giant. He's like Goliath. So he says, well, Sihon couldn't do it, but I can do it. So he brings his people down as the Israelites are going up north, and he defeats them there. That's the little detail that we have here. Here's kind of a tricky question. Somebody go over to Judges chapter 11. I should tell you what, for the sake of time, I want to spend our time last time in John. Hopefully somebody got a chance to read in Judges chapter 11 that the king of Ammon kind of rewrites some of these stories. What does the king of Ammon change around here detail-wise? Debbie?
He makes him the hero.
Yeah, so what I find really interesting is years and years later, these guys are telling this story, and they're telling it from the perspective of, well, it was us. Now that's kind of interesting, by the way, because there's a people in the New Testament that do the same thing. They're a group of people, and they think, oh yeah, we're the ones that God brought out of Egypt, and we're the ones. You remember what they were? They thought, somebody said it. Samaritans, very good. Kind of like the Samaritans. They adopted another culture, their history, and made it their own. And the Ammonites kind of have this statement where they kind of rewrite this as though they were the ones that did all of these mighty deeds. One more question before we jump over to the book of John. There's an unusual statement made in verse 14 where